Two statements I hope we can all agree with is water is life and water is a human right. I want to talk about an important piece of legislation that was passed in 2022 that is by no means perfect, but the most important parts are a direct result of frontline advocates for environmental and racial justice, like water protectors. This new legislation would strengthen resilience in Indigenous communities like my own. There is many funds available for many things, but one I want to highlight is the funds available to foster food sovereignty. Tribal leaders are able to tap into $10 million for fish hatcheries. My band, the Leech Lake Band of Ojibwe, have fish hatcheries to populate the lakes within our reservation boundaries that tribal members can then net and feed their families with, like my family members do. We need to continue to build pressure that racial justice is prioritized in rolling out these funds. To do that and learn more, please check out the link in my link tree. Miigwech, thank you. Also, this is a white pine.
Welcome to the world of cottagecore lifestyle. This is a cottage where I would specifically live in, and today I wanted to talk to you about this amazing community and why it promotes a self-sustainable lifestyle and how it can promote other connections to our community. With new federal legislation, we can now all benefit from the simpler ways of living this lifestyle. Examples of what the new federal legislation will do is help promote sustainable agriculture, and for urban communities, it will help develop urban forests and do many tree planting initiatives to help increase tree equity. Now, I wish all my friends could live in these cottages like this, but your cottage can literally be any home that you want it to be. Choosing to live a cottagecore lifestyle is about building community with the relationships around your neighborhood. Not only is living a cottagecore lifestyle fulfilling, but it also helps reduce our carbon footprint and our environmental impact to the planet. So I want you to join the cottagecore community to enjoy a more simpler lifestyle supported by the government's new legislation.
After my mom died, I didn't have 3 meals a day and was often hungry. This spurred my love of food and daily gratitude for where it comes from. Right now, the federal government has promised a $4 billion investment to develop climate-smart and drought-resilient agricultural practices that works to protect farm workers and the food we all eat. I feel like it's our responsibility to make sure that promise is kept. So both this promise and gratitude is something I'll pass on to Zephyr. Learn more at getloud.org.
Stop the beat, can't stop, can't stop the beat, won't stop, won't stop the beat, go! Everybody, the answer, everybody.
Money for the earth, money for the earth, money for the earth, for the earth. There's money for the earth, for the water, for the soil, for indigenous communities fighting big oil. Money for clean energy, money for clean air, greens for our ecology, lots of kill to share. Millions, billions for climate resilience, trillions of microbes teeming with brilliance. Let's team up for the future generations, regenerative ag and solar transportation. Earth be spinning like hula, we need less cows, we be getting that moolah. Sequester that carbon, make the earth cooler. For reforestation, we planted the tula. Birch better get that money, trees. Birch better get that money, trees. Get those funds, build swales, catch rain on the trail, for it goes to the whales. Breathe in and exhale, go ahead grow, make Pachamama proud. This paper plants trees, it's time to get loud. It's all for the earth, for the land, for the sea flow. There's no economy without a healthy eco.
Thank you, everyone. We just wanted to share some of that at the top while everyone was joining us. Again, welcome to our webinar today. Thank you for joining us. Today, we're going to be sharing a case study of how we worked with more than 25 influencers across TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube to educate people about the Inflation Reduction Act across 8 different issue areas. So before we kick it off, I wanted to do a quick round of intros for the folks who worked on this campaign. I'll start it off. My name is Jessica Jewell. I'm based out of Whittier, California on Tongva. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the digital director at the Water Hub. If you don't know who we are, we're a pro bono comms and digital resource for the water movement. I bring around 10 years of experience working with celebrities and influencers, and was really excited because this was a very unique project and opportunity to work with some smart people across 3 organizations to spread the word about this work. And I'll pass it off to Liz.
Hey everyone, I'm Elizabeth Soto. I'm the digital director at Climate Nexus. We are a climate communication shop that services the movement, and we're increasingly ramping up our work with influencers, and we're excited to share some of that work with you here today. So thank you so much, and I will pass it to Eliana.
Hi, everyone. I'm Eliana Miller. I'm the social media manager at Climate Nexus. Really excited to share some of the findings of this campaign with you. And I'm going to pass it over to Tina Lee.
Hi, everyone. My name is Tina Lee. I'm based just outside of Denver, Colorado on traditional Cheyenne Arapaho lands. I'm the senior manager of digital data analytics at Climate Nexus and really excited to be here with y'all today. I'll pass it over to Olivia.
Thanks so much, Tina. My name is Olivia Blocker. I use she, her pronouns based out of Chicago, Illinois, and I work for Resource Media, but I'm proud of this project from the top and yeah, excited to share our findings today. And I will pass to Claudia.
Thank you. Claudia Garcia here, she, her pronouns, based out of Miami, Florida. Also work at Resource Media on digital ads and research. I'm super excited to talk a little bit more about this project. I'll send it over to Carrie.
Hi, everyone. Happy to be here. My name is Carrie Cullen. I use she, her pronouns, based in Hamburg, New Jersey on Lenape land, and I'm my program director at Resource Media. And with that, I will pass it over to Jessica to kick us off.
Thanks, Carrie. So to frame this at the top, this was a unique campaign that straddled 3 different organizations between Resource Media, Climate Nexus, and the Water Hub to amplify the benefits of the Inflation Reduction Act for climate, water, and people. Our goal was to work with trusted influencers and messengers across social who live outside of the policy and media ivory tower to engage and excite people about the IRA's benefits. We also saw this as an opportunity to infuse some humor and fun into our work, which, if y'all know, we can work on some heady and wonky stuff. So reaching people where they spend their time and in their hearts and where they can laugh really can make a difference. And we wanted to test that out. I'll pass it over to Lynn.
Okay, so I'm sure many of you are already aware of this, but just to set the stage a little bit, we want to give some context about the IRA. So we all know, while it's not the perfect piece of legislation, the IRA is the single biggest investment in climate communities, clean energy, and jobs ever. It has the potential to lower costs for families / climate pollution, excuse me. But that can't happen if we stay silent. So our motivation was really to get people excited about the benefits made possible through the IRA, ensure our family, friends, and communities receive the money promised by this historic piece of legislation. And how is that? By speaking to the topics and interests our target audiences care about most. Basically, via culture, via influencers. So let's just pause for a second and reflect on the fact that I bet when most people hear this term, their face probably looks like Megan Good's face in this wonderful GIF here. Next slide. And the research we've done and the context we've gathered shows that that's true. Back in October, we did some polling, social listening, media analysis, and got some anecdotal feedback on the IRA. What we found was that the conversation was really dominated by policy wonks in the media. Most people have no idea what the term means. And social conversation volume on the topic is very low compared to other topics that we tracked. TikTok showed the lowest volume of mentions, and YouTube showed the highest number of engagements. Sentiment on this, that from what we saw through social listening, was also primarily positive. And of the Americans who do know what it is, 47% said they favor it. So for us, what that really showed was that it's go time. And to recap, our goal behind this effort was to make the benefits touted by the IRA feel real, personable, and accessible to wider audiences. And we wanted those audiences to get loud about these provisions. And not just that, but to demand just implementation at the state level. And lastly, we wanted to de-wonk and de-Biden the heck out of all of this language. And to do that, we felt it was very important to talk to working people and families. We also felt it was really important to hone in on the monetary benefits. and to encourage people to take advantage of tax season, rebates and credits, and to highlight justice, water, and food, as well as focusing on the femmes. A lot of research shows that it's actually women that primarily control the household finances. So we felt like that was also very important.
Thanks so much, Liz. I'm going to talk a little bit about the strategy here. I'm going to be talking about our brand a little bit, the audiences, sort of the phases of the campaign, as well as some of our messaging. So we went with Let's Get Loud for the title of this campaign because it served sort of two purposes. We definitely wanted space to talk about the benefits, but we also understand that this was a really complicated piece of legislation. We understand that there were compromises, so we didn't want this to be a blanket rah, rah, rah for the IRA. We wanted some accountability in the implementation of this piece of legislation. So Let's Get Loud really served this dual purpose of, yes, let's get loud about the benefits. This is cool. This is like, these are the best pieces of the IRA, but also let's get loud about like making sure that this is equitably implemented. So that's sort of why we use this phrase. You can see some of our branding to the left here, and you can also go to get-loud.org to see a little bit more there, but we really tried to keep it really bright and poppy and exciting and engaging. Again, as Liz mentioned, our audiences were women, BIPOC women, specifically the ages millennial and Gen Z audiences were sort of where we focused. So we had two major objectives with this campaign. The first one definitely being sort of our primary focus here, which is really just, we wanted to see the spike in conversation outlined in the IRA, just increase content, increase the conversation. As Liz mentioned, this has been a really wonky subject. We're not really seeing a lot of conversation about the IRA in our households with our, are you having this conversation with your parents? So this was really about like, what does it mean to like sort of break down this complicated piece of legislation and make it accessible for a broader audience? Sort of our secondary objective, and this was, we knew this action piece was a little bit of a stretch. It was really an experiment to see what does it mean to develop action around an implementation ask, and what does it mean to try and create urgency around that. So for this piece, we did have an action component where we tried to hold state level decision makers accountable to making sure that the benefits flow out to the people are actually, again, equitably implemented. This was never, as simple as like, let's pass the IRA. The IRA has already been passed. So it really was about sort of like, let's make sure that this is done right, which is a lot harder of an ask. And we'll break down what that looks like throughout the campaign a little bit later. So the phases of the campaign, we kicked this off in March, a lot of internal conversations, pre-launch. This is when we started reaching out to influencers, securing commitments, really finding who could be the voice of this campaign or who could be the voices of this campaign. Content started dropping in April. This is when the influencers really started to put out their content organically. By May, we started digitally boosting. This is when we took some content and we started promoting it on Instagram if they had only posted it on TikTok. And this is where we also used Spark ads to digitally boost within platform for TikTok as well. So those first two phases were really about awareness, edutainment, persuasion. And then the third month, we were like, okay, let's see what the action component looks like. And this is when we started repurposing some of that content for that push. Like, let's, okay, you've seen this for the first 2 months. Let's ask your governor, sort of a higher level ask in that third month. And then over the last month and a half, we've been really digging into some of the data and that we're excited to share with you later in this presentation. How we measured this, again, the first 2 months, sort of our metrics for success, we're really looking at video views, video completion rates, click-through rates to our website. And again, this third piece, we're measuring engagement around this action component a little differently. So looking at signups, how many letters were actually sent, cost per acquisition. Yeah, those were some of the KPIs that we're looking at, key performance indicators. Yep, as we mentioned, this was our audience, female, BIPOC, Gen Z, and millennial. A lot of our creators were Gen Z, but we also partnered with ACE to develop, sort of broaden that reach to that Gen Z audience. This was the Action for the Climate Emergency group that has like a beautiful network of influencers that we were also able to tap into to sort of develop a co-current campaign in that last month to push some additional letters to governors in July there. Influencer audiences. So part of our strategy was really trying to look at all the different elements of the IRA and seeing where the intersections were with content that creators may already be creating. So we had two sort of large buckets that we qualified. So we had inside the echo chamber and outside the echo chamber creators. So the inside the echo chamber being a little bit more creators who already create content around the environment or sustainability or justice or transit or water rights. So their audiences are really used to hearing about advocacy on some level. And then we had the outside the echo chamber influencers, and these were influencers who maybe just do fitness content or maybe just talk about being a parent or a new mom or do cooking content. So people whose audiences don't necessarily aren't necessarily used to hearing about legislation or advocacy in this particular way. And really it was trying to find on-ramps for these audiences to learning more about the IRA. Issue areas. So as you know, the IRA, a massive omnibus bill with lots of very complicated components. We broke this down into 8 major categories: water rights, rides being really EVs and transit related components to the IRA, home renovation and savings, really about those tax rebates and financial gains that individuals and consumers can get from the IRA, green spaces, justice really being about EJ communities, and then food and farming, sort of like the agricultural components of the IRA. So on the website, how that was manifested was different pages for each category, and depending on the content that the creator was talking about, or what element of the IRA the creator was talking about, their click-through went to these specific pages. So if we had a parent talking about making food for their kid and tied it to the agricultural elements of the IRA, then it took them to the food and farming page where people could learn more about that specific element of the IRA page. On the back end, this was a lot of very complicated influencer messaging where we really tried to break down the complicated pieces and tried to really give the influencers ideas on how best to talk about this. And I will pass it off to Jessica to talk about influencers a bit more.
Thanks, Olivia. So I was one of the folks who helped lead creator recruitment for the campaign, and definitely can get it. There's a lot of lingo associated in this space and it changes oftentimes. So just wanted to kind of break it down of, what's a nano influencer or a micro influencer and what's the difference? In my experience, having worked on, celebrity PSA campaigns or ads, or now with influencers on TikTok, and now working even more with these micro influencer creators, I'm learning that the content can often get more engagement if you work with a micro influencer than even sometimes compared to like a mega influencer or a celebrity, because even if they don't have millions of followers, folks feel like they can connect with them on a more personal level, and that they may feel like less out of touch, or that folks aren't holding them on a pedestal, or that their lifestyle is completely unattainable compared to theirs. They might also engage more directly with their followers in the comments, for example. So people really look to them for guidance and suggestions for their lifestyle choices and just for information. So that was our strategy with this. We primarily worked with micro influencers for this effort. Next, wanted to break down the pay structure that we used for this. So this work does take time. So it is important to honor the effort spent by offering compensation whenever possible when you're working with influencers. Our best relationships are grounded in reciprocity when creating change, both within our movement and our allies. For example, if you were to partner with a creator, you can think of creators as freelance educators and storytellers. They spend time and intention to produce this information. Rates can vary from person to person, and like I teased, this was the fee structure we used for this particular campaign, with some outliers. For example, for folks who were here with us as people were joining, and we'll play the whole video later, but we did have one creator create an original rap song with a music video, so that looked a little different, but this was roughly the structure for this campaign. And I'll pass it off to Carrie.
Thanks, Jessica. So of course, a great influencer campaign comes down to great influencers, right? And so it's pretty, I feel like it's sort of easy to gravitate towards the influencers that just have the most followers. However, we found that our most effective videos were the ones that had a level of authenticity that came through. And so we found it really helpful to invest a little extra time in the beginning to actually do the research and vet the right influencers who would be the right fit for our campaign. So we have a few tips and tricks that we walked away with from the campaign that I'd love to share. But first, research can be scrolling through TikTok or Instagram, looking up a term. It can be following and searching by hashtags. A few times we Googled things like best urban planner TikTokers to follow. Another strategy is to find, the perfect creator and see who they are following and sort of look at building community through that way. So the first tip that we would recommend if you're researching the right influencers would be do their videos feature any social commentary? So on one hand, it's okay if there aren't a ton of videos in their feed that are super political or super cause-based, but it's helpful to kind of gauge if there is a level of passion, because that passion and that personal connection will absolutely shine through. And of course, you also want to make sure that they're not on the other side of things. For example, if we partnered with someone who did videos for big oil for this campaign, maybe not the best look. Second, a great question to ask is, what is their voice? And so there are so many great influencers out there, but it doesn't mean just because an influencer creates great content, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're the right fit for your campaign and your cause. So does it seem like the way that they tell stories would be right to tell your story, in other words? Number 3, quick assessment of who their followers are. We found that to be very helpful. And again, just hiring someone who has 10 million followers might seem like the instinct here, but really, if you are running a campaign where the goal is for viewers to take action or spread the word, really it's about quality over quantity with followers. So for example, if somebody posts a video and you see all the people that are following them are in the comments saying, this really impacted me, I'm going to call my representative, or thank you for sharing this, and sharing their own story, you can kind of gauge that the impact there is much higher than, for example, if someone were to just see it and keep scrolling through their feed. 4, does the influencer do partnership videos? And if so, do they seem genuine or more transactional? We're seeing over and over again in communications, viewers can really tell on social media when they're receiving an ad, and when viewers are trying to, when accounts are trying to sell you something. Maybe you've seen this on your own when scrolling through social media. So looking for creators that really are invested and do genuine partnerships that just kind of go beyond, feeling like an advertisement. Finally, we found it really helpful, especially because we were working with a topic as wonky and hard to understand as the IRA. We found it really helpful to provide message guidance and resources so that the influencers can have a little bit of background on the topic without having to read through on their own. And this way we could also sort of help them stay in line with the goals of our campaign. And so we're actually going to follow up with an example of what that guidance looked like. But one thing I will say is be sure to leave room for creative freedom. just sending over a script will probably not be the most effective, because creators are really the expert in talking to their audience. It's what they do best. So just let them work their magic and leave room for creative freedom. So when we actually started to collaborate with influencers, we broke it down into these 5 phases. So the first, what I just mentioned, was research. So that was kind of the most time consuming part of the campaign. So securing influencer commitments, kind of building a list of who to reach out to. Second, with outreach, we found that reaching out via email got the most responses. Just sending a DM or commenting on their videos could come across as a little bit spammy. So most influencers and creators that are open to doing partnerships will actually have the email to contact them in their bio or somewhere else on their page. 3, another phase that really took a lot of time was contracting. So we definitely recommend having a written contract anytime that you're working with a creator, getting really clear on expectations on both sides, things like compensation, terms. So by that, we mean, will this be boosted as an ad? How long will they post it? We'll talk a little bit more about contracting and share a sample contract, but really the big takeaway here is to set aside ample time for this, because it does take a while. Finally, we reviewed our creators' TikToks and Instagram videos once they were done, and provided feedback just to make sure that, all of the numbers around the IRA and everything were accurate, and just kind of taking a final look. And then finally, posting. This part might seem obvious, but we found it really helpful to agree on posting dates ahead of time. Since this was a 3-month campaign, we were able to stagger it out, instead of just having creators post, all at the same time or something. And then we also made sure that creators would send us their Spark code ad and their link if we were going to be boosting the video as ads, just sort of making sure that all the ducks are in the row before they kind of finish up the partnership. So that's how we ran the campaign. And now I'm going to pass it over to Liz to talk a little bit about the impact.
Okay, we have arrived at the golden question for any campaign or promotion effort. What impact did this have? And so when it comes to any campaign at the outset, we want to ask ourselves a couple of questions. How do we ensure this campaign had an impact? And how do we set ourselves up to see what that impact is? Well, don't worry. If your reaction is like Jack Skellington's in The Nightmare Before Christmas, when it comes to hearing words like clicks, view rate, through rate, cost per click, I don't know, there's a ton of metrics out there and a lot of fancy marketing acronyms. Don't worry. We're going to translate this a little bit for you so that you don't look like Jack when he's asking, but what does it mean? All right, so the numbers are in. This is a look at the impact of all the influencer videos that we commissioned, and we do want to thank ACE for their amazing efforts at commissioning their own community or the influencers that they're in community with. This does not include those numbers, and if you are interested, would be happy to share more about that if you have specific questions around it. But for now, these are the cumulative numbers. And what I want to say about this is, while impressions might seem something like a vanity metric, for us, seeing that uptick in volume and conversation, ensuring saturation, that was a major goal. So that is why we're looking at these metrics. And these numbers are far and above what we normally see in terms of both Resource Media's benchmarks and Climate Nexus's benchmarks for the campaigns that we normally run. So this is really exciting stuff. We saw over 15 million impressions from all of this content, over 14 million views, which basically translates to over 10 million people reached. We did parse out some of the data when it comes to engagements. Facebook likes to include 3-second video views and link clicks when counting engagements. We discounted that and we just looked purely at comments, likes, and shares and saves. And so we saw around 350,000 engagements, over 90,000 clicks to our website. This is just from paid media. And then in total, over 50,000 visits to the website. Something else I want to highlight in terms of impact, we got some very positive feedback directly from our partners and based on comments we were seeing on the influencer videos, really thanking us for the plethora of information that they were able to find on the website. There's a lot of information out there about the IRA in its various facets. So through this process, we actually discovered that one of the biggest value adds of the website that we could provide was its ability to distill and aggregate resources where audiences could find out how to take advantage of the IRA's provisions. So under that Get That Money section of the site, individuals could actually find out how they could take advantage of things like energy tax credits. If you're a nonprofit or city worker, you could find out where to go to apply for grants related to green infrastructure or environmental justice. Farmers could see what grants were available to them through the Department of Agriculture. So inadvertently, we discovered that this was a major value add of our website. And I will pass it to Claudia, who will talk a little bit more about TikTok ad performance.
Thank you, Liz. Yeah, so we wanted to talk a little bit about how each of the platforms where we boosted ads performed. And as Liz said, it was really great, strong results. 7 million people reached on it on TikTok, generating close to 9 million video views is something that's a big number, and it is because we don't see that often. The cost per result, which is in this case is a 6-second view when you're running awareness video use ads to get your message out there to as many people as possible. That's what TikTok uses to measure that performance, and that was just a cent. So very cost efficient. We were also able to get over 116,000 video completions and over 25,000 clicks just from paid on TikTok. Very cost efficient as well. And as we've been talking about, we boosted several types of different content from food, from parenting, and we saw some really exciting results as to what was some of those influencer videos and their sort of frames that were performing the best. And we saw that the food and parenting generated the highest video engagements, with a particular video from Sarah's who was around food and farming, generating the highest video completion rate. So that's the rate at how people finished the video, at how much. And we saw some pretty interesting and similar things on Meta, and I'll kick it over to Tina to talk a little bit about that.
Thanks, Claudia. Yeah, so on Meta, we saw kind of similar results compared to TikTok. On Meta, we advertised specifically on Instagram and not on Facebook. So we didn't have quite the same volume of people reached. We were at 2.4 million and 4.2 million video plays, but we saw similar videos that had the highest that rose to the top in terms of who was engaging with them. So Sarah Chetrit's video on food and farming also saw the highest video completion rate on Instagram. So people who watched the video through to the end. And we had pretty good metrics that were either in line or above our benchmarks and platform benchmarks in terms of cost per through play. So through plays on Meta or Instagram are people who watch a video for 15 seconds or more or through to completion. We had a 275,000 video completions and over 65,000 video clicks. And then in the conversion phase of the campaign, where we were driving people to sign those letters to the governors, the fitness and environmental justice message frames really drove the most letters, conversions, and completions there. So some similarities with TikTok performance as well. So these were the influencer videos that performed the best in terms of video completion rate, engagement, that really resonated and saturated with the audience. So these first two ones, actually this one on the left here is the rap video that Jessica mentioned earlier, the one that we showed at the beginning of this presentation. This one was a little bit longer, but because of the unique and music aspects of it, it had some really high engagement. And then these two on the right, these were around 20 seconds long. This middle one is that Sarah Chetrit video that both Claudia and I mentioned around food and farming. And this one on the right is from Mariah Rose. She talked about outdoor green spaces and was targeted at a fitness audience. On the organic side, there were also 2 additional videos that had over 1.3 million views on TikTok. And those videos fell within the transit and home renovation message frames. And I'll pass it back over to Claudia to talk about takeaways.
Thank you, Tina. We wanted to put together a couple of paid media takeaways. We'll talk about larger takeaways in just a moment now, but as we've been saying, the reach, awareness, and engagements results were really strong and consistent across both platforms, which was really nice to see. And they were above benchmark and very cost efficient. And when you are boosting over 25 pieces of content, you learn a thing or two. So we have very exciting creative takeaways that are that we saw through the campaign. So we saw that the direct, shorter, and more engaging videos drove the video engagement, and we recommend to keep videos on the shorter end and more to the point right away in those first 6 seconds of the video. Tapping into music, rapping, and trends was highly engagement. And on TikTok, we learned that those videos that have a look and feel like your native TikTok video is what's going to perform best. On the action phase, we ran more ad looking, more general looking creatives, and they didn't perform as well as the TikTok influencers, which makes sense because it's a relatively new platform. People are just used to seeing a person there talking. So really either tapping into influencers or having a spokespersons for your videos and your ads is the way to go on TikTok. On Instagram, we recommend that the ads are tailored to the dimensions of each placement. So really making sure that you have that vertical video for reels and stories is really important. And then in doing such a complex advertising campaign, we realized that maybe simplifying the campaign structure for a little bit and being more defined on which creatives we run and which issue areas we go for would be a better way to optimize the budget. And we'll talk a little bit more about that just now. I'll pass it over to Eliana to talk about organic.
Hi, everyone. So we created organic social media accounts on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter for the Let's Get Loud campaign. We ended up posting 178 pieces of original content through these accounts, and these accounts were meant to promote the influencer content. The top performing posts promoted a video from Pedestrian Dignity on transportation equity, and through activating our network, content on our accounts was retweeted by influential voices in the climate space, including Vanessa Nakate, Dr. Mustafa Santiago Ali, Dr. Ayana Elizabeth Johnson, and the Years Project. And I will now pass it over to Jessica to talk about lessons learned.
Hi, thank you. And shout out to Years folks that are in the room. And just wanted to share, make sure that we have space for Q&A, but we'll run through some of our lessons learned on the broad strokes of what we learned on what issues resonated with audience to the nuts and bolts of the time required to launch a large influencer campaign like this. So a step you should account for is the time that's required to button up contracts that Carrie was talking about, from usage rights, like making sure it's clear that we're intending to run paid ads with this, to other more granular details like spelling out that folks need to include a campaign link in their bio. We also had to tweak some of our contracts to reflect special licensing needs, for example, or to ask that people also share the content in their Instagram stories. But we had to kind of customize some of these contracts, and that took a bit of time. Yeah, so the other piece that we learned a lot about in the next slide was the letters to the governor strategy. So we use this automated letter targeting tool based on those 8 frames we talked about to try to hold these leaders accountable to very specific policy asks. Now, what we learned the hard way, but was a great experiment, was that splintering these calls to action caused decision fatigue and overwhelm, having 8 different versions of a letter. and wasn't quite the most strategic approach. So we saw a total of 645 letters sent. Almost half of those were in the last week when we were focused on a single general letter rather than, these different facets, and that earned almost 70% of the signatures. As I said, this was a pilot. We learned, and it became clear that this was more of an awareness and education initiative. And this also speaks to strategic disparities between trying to communicate around nuanced policy while also being accurate in our communications that can sometimes, in this case, leave our impact stretched a little thin. Looking back, we see some of the key ingredients that were lacking to make this piece successful. For example, we didn't have a target piñata or a villain for folks to rally against and get them motivated to take action. There wasn't a huge timely hook. This legislation, as we said, is huge and straddles different agencies and elected officials' oversight. So creating a compelling call to action that was effective and clear was a little tricky. It's also important, just as a tip for ourselves and for the movement, like when you have an action, it's important to also have a plan for your letter of engagement to keep people looped in and help amplify your message in the future. I will pass it off to Olivia.
Thanks, Jessica. Another element that we sort of dug into was just general sentiment. In addition to sort of the hard numbers that we looked at, video views, click-through rates, we wanted to see what was the conversation actually being had in these comment sections on these videos. This is specifically an analysis of comments that were left on creators' pages. So this does not include videos that we boosted outside of the creators' pages. So we did through Meta, we did take some TikTok videos and boosted them through our Get Loud pages and things like that. And we did have content or comment moderation on those videos. And we even had some creators reach out, and if they noticed they had questions that they weren't sure how to answer, we did provide resources for the creators to be able to engage with their audiences. But ultimately, the sentiment analysis is specifically looking at comment sections on creators' pages on TikTok and Instagram. On the positive side, we saw that inside the echo chamber, probably not surprisingly, had a lot more positive sentiment than outside the echo chamber. If you're looking at videos that are, and you're used to seeing content around advocacy and you signed up for that and you have a creator who's talking about the climate and you want to hear it, you're probably going to respond a little bit more positively than if you follow a fitness creator and all of a sudden you're hearing about the IRA and you're like, I follow you for your, basketball takes. So it skewed slightly more positive for the inside the echo chamber creators. I will say the water issue area, water advocacy was extremely well received by audiences. One of our creators whose video, if you were here at the very top, you saw a water protector from Minnesota. They had extremely positive engagement. You can see some of the comments on the side to the left here, but people just really sharing about their own lives, sharing about, hashtag water is life, just hundreds and hundreds of comments and extremely positive. I will also say the transit-oriented videos also did very well for we only had 2 videos that sort of fell under this category. And considering the proportion of videos, we had a lot of extremely positive responses to that as well. And very engaged, not just heart emoji, but we had a lot of those. It was also just sort of people sharing about their neighborhoods, the expansion of highways, how they, their neighborhoods aren't walkable, those sorts of comments. And it was really lovely to see. On the negative side of things, I will say the most poorly received issue areas were the home renovation and savings issues areas. Comments here ranged really from the extremes of climate change denial to more conservative anti-Biden rhetoric, to just sort of more potentially bipartisan disillusionment with the savings, that savings were actually possible through this. So you can see again some of the comments here to the right, but I spent $3,400 on new windows and got a $100 tax credit. People aren't seeing the savings. yeah, people, it's not a relatable message at this point. So we need to be strategic about how we talk about those components of the IRA. So some high level messaging considerations based on some this high level sentiment analysis. Rides, specifically around transit, had really positive sentiment in general. I think we should lean into that as a component of the IRA to focus on. I think there is an engaged contingent, specifically on TikTok, that is used to this kind of content and will positively engage with it. Savings and home reno, we need to talk about this in a more accessible way, in a way that doesn't assume people are homeowners or like really understand how to get these particular rebates. You know, as someone who is a target demographic for this component, it's very wonky and it's very hard to figure out what the savings actually look like. So really stripping it down and really being real about what this looks like for renters and for everyday people. And then finally, continuing to engage Indigenous communities. Extremely positive, again, sentiment on those videos. The water is life sentiment is extremely resonant. We know what the water issue is bipartisan and potentially expanding to more racial justice and intersectional framing for future messaging around the IRA. And I will pass this off to Jessica for the final thoughts.
Yeah, final thoughts. I'm going to run through this so we can get through to your questions as well, but just high level, again, to recap, we would focus on fewer issues and kind of lean into the messages that Olivia was mentioning that were resonant to get more legs out of our budget and core messages. We would also simplify the heck out of the call to action on the website and make the user experience more clear and compelling to get more conversions. We would also kick off organic promotion right away from our branded channels to get more visibility and placements for the creator content. In the future, we would, provide more proactive templated responses for the comment section for our creators so that they can more deeply engage in these conversations, have prepared answers for any myth busting or for folks that are interested to learn more to generate engagement and education more deeply. We would involve our amazing minds at our paid side in the strategy more earlier. We would do that because, for example, we wanted to see to do some more pre and post polling to see what kind of sentiment lift we could have gotten by people who were exposed to our influencer videos and people who weren't, using tools like a TikTok voting sticker. So we can have a really nice control group and variable group. And last, also a couple other things just briefly is that we know collaboration is key. ACE is here with us. It was fantastic to collaborate with them. We would love to align our efforts with other folks in our space early on to help each other, with our IRA implementation comms. And lastly, we know there's an elephant in the room, and that is that there is a presidential election season going on, and it's going to be a hustle and a struggle, and we do need each other and to be really smart about how we frame and communicate out around policy issues as the media landscape gets more cluttered. With that, I yield my time. We'll make space for Q&A and encourage folks to stick around. I'm going to drop a link to the survey in the chat and encourage folks who are hanging out to fill it out well, if this is fresh in your mind. In the meantime, I will stop talking. Eliana, yeah, if you could please take us through some of the questions, that'd be great.
Alrighty, so I'm going to read out some of the questions that were dropped in the Q&A and in the chat. Thank you to everyone who asked a question. And when I ask this question, just whoever wants to answer this, please raise your hand and I'll pass it to you to answer. So let's start out with some questions that we got about paid promotion. We got a few questions about political content and the paid ads being potentially marked as political content. So here's the first question. Were any of the ads determined to be political content by social platforms? If so, how did you navigate that with the platforms?
I can take that. Yeah, so on Facebook or Meta, as long as you have your disclaimer on and your page is verified, you shouldn't run into any issues getting ads approved. That kind of just does it. On TikTok, it is a little more tricky because they don't have political advertising, and you kind of have to jump some hoops to make sure your ads get approved, but there isn't like a formal process or anything that goes into it. You kind of just set up your ads as you normally would. What we found was that most of them out of the 25, maybe 2 got rejected for being political, and we tried to we talked to TikTok support and we submitted a ticket, and some of them did get approved with a manual review and some of them didn't get approved at all. And it was actually only one that specifically mentioned like presidential, like Biden's name was mentioned and president, and like, you know, it was very much starting to lean over to more political, like election focused sort of language. So I would recommend to stray away a little bit from that and keep it more advocacy related, more we're doing this for climate or for water, or for justice, and not maybe call out president or Biden or, you know, those more election sort of wordings in the videos. And you can work with your influencer to make sure that that's something that goes on a messaging guide, like please don't mention this, or try to go around it in a more advocacy leaning way.
Something else that might be worth mentioning is that we strategically tried to stay away from, because we were trying to de-wonk and de-Biden it, we encouraged creators, if possible, to not mention the term IRA, or at least not unless they felt compelled to do so. We really just wanted to focus on the benefits. Of course, it's kind of hard to do that without at least saying something like climate legislation, right? But yeah, it was a tricky balance, I would say.
Thank you, Claudia and Liz. And Claudia, while we're on paid questions, do you mind just answering another question we got from the chat, which is, what is a Spark code?
Yeah, of course. So the way that you can boost on Facebook, on TikTok, one of 2 ways. You can create a profile for your organization and boost an influencer video downloaded by the influencer. But most often we use a Spark code, which is a code that the influencer can produce on the back end of their account, and they share it with us. And once we have that code, we have access to boost the video from their page, directly from their page. So we don't have to create a third-party page to boost videos from with the code. So you would work with your influencer and you work that into the contracts as well to make sure that you have access or rights to the video, and that they will provide the Spark code for you to basically find the video on the ads platform of TikTok.
Thank you, Claudia. So now let's move over to some questions that we got about analytics. So here's the first question. Of the audience mentioned at the start, which was the most engaged with the content created? Does anyone want to take that question?
I can try to take it, at least on the Instagram ad side of things. In terms of audience buckets and targeting audiences based on those interest areas, we really saw the food and farming audience perform really well, the fitness audience perform really well, and then there was one more, I have it, and it's on the tip of my tongue, but it's not coming. But those 2 were really, the fitness and the food and farming audiences were really the most engaged. And then I think the third highest one was actually at least the Andrew Townsend video, that one where we said it was 1.3 million views on TikTok, performed really well individually on the paid ad side as well. Claudia, you saw similar on TikTok as well, right?
Yeah, we saw similar performance on TikTok as well.
Thank you so much, Tina and Claudia. And Tina, while we're on analytics, do you mind answering this other question on analytics, which was what tool or tools was used to analyze the impact?
Yeah, we definitely pulled data directly from the platform, but I also used Google Looker Studio to sort of aggregate the data, do some calculated fields to look at some of the metrics that the key metrics that we were looking at, like video completion rate, cost per click, to see, the cost effectiveness of each of the videos and which audience has performed the best, and just having it all into one place with all of the data. Sometimes the in-platform user interface is not the most intuitive or easy to visualize things. So the main tool that I used personally was the Looker Studio. I created a dashboard to really parse out the data there.
Thank you, Tina. I think we have time for maybe just a couple more questions. So we also got some general questions about the campaign. One that was just dropped into the chat was, what were your metrics for success?
We really sort of divided it by phase. As you may recall, we tried to break it up into an awareness, persuasion, and a persuasion or consideration, and then a decision-making phase. Looking back, 3 months was a very short amount of time to do that. And really, I would say metrics for success, we did define at the outset, because we live in this video first marketing world. Something actually that Leah Kuspa had mentioned of ACE was that it's all about edutainment. So we were really looking at video completion rates, through plays, in addition to video views, but mostly video completion rates and through plays, which is a little bit different between Instagram and TikTok. And what else? Yeah, I mean, there were other types of metrics that we looked at during the decision-making phase, but I would say on the whole, those are the ones that we really place the most value in for this effort.
Thank you, Liz.
And I might be able to add on to one more question I saw. It's kind of like a follow-on. Sorry. Someone asked about TikTok voting sticker ads. There's this really cool feature in TikTok that lets you ask a question on a video. Very simple. It could be a yes or no question. That was something else we were really interested in and seeing the efficacy of as a metric of success. One thing we learned was that kind of have to be careful with setup in order to yield statistical significance. So that's something we'd want to experiment with further. And I'll put a link to TikTok voting sticker ads in the chat.
Thank you so much. I'm going to pass it back to Jessica.
Really quickly, I think we also don't want to de-emphasize the fact that this was like a pilot program. This was really to test a lot of things. So while those hard metrics were like important to look at and then see the impact, like I think the learnings of like what pieces of the IRA people are drawn to, how people are responding like in the general populace to this information, as well as the process of just engaging influencers on such a specific and impactful and important and historic piece of legislation was really part of the process. So I would really emphasize also impact through process and the learnings and the message that we got out of this.
Great. I want to be mindful that we are at time, a little over time, unless there is anything really pressing in the Q&A. I'm happy to take us out and we can play Gila's rap song if folks want to watch it. It's just a minute long. Let's go for it. Thank you, Tina.
Money for the earth, money for the earth, money for the earth, for the earth. There's money for the earth, for the water, for the soil, for indigenous communities fighting big oil. Money for clean energy, money for clean air, greens for our ecology, lots of kill to share. Millions, billions for climate resilience, trillions of microbes teeming with brilliance. Let's team up for the future generations, regenerative ag and solar transportation. Earth be spinning like hula, we need less cows, we be getting that moolah. Sequester that carbon, make the earth cooler. conservation, we planted Betula. Birch better get that money. Birch better get that money. Get those funds, build swales, catch rain on the trail. Before it goes to the whales, breathe in and exhale. Go ahead, grow, make Pachamama proud. This paper plants trees, it's time to get loud. It's all for the earth, for the land, for the sea flow. There's no economy without a healthy eco.
Thank you.